Have you ever walked out of an interview thinking it went well, only to hear nothing back? You start second-guessing everything. Was it the way you answered that one question? Did you seem too eager, maybe too casual? It's frustrating, especially when you know you have the experience. But here's something most people don't realize. It's not about what you said. It's about how it was framed and how that framing subtly shifted the power dynamic in the room. Because interviews aren't just about showcasing your skills. They're about managing perception. They're about maintaining leverage. If you're not in control of the narrative, someone else is, and that's when opportunities start to slip. After years inside hiring systems at Google, Lyft, Uber, and TikTok, I've seen smart, capable candidates lose offers not because they weren't a fit, but because of small, overlooked missteps that didn't even realize that they were making. And that's what this video is about. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 8 overlooked interview mistakes that quietly cost you leverage and what to say instead. These aren't personality flaws. They're framing issues. And once you fix the frame, your answers start working for you, not against you. So let's start with the first one. This is something that a lot of well-meaning candidates do to build rapport, but it ends up subtly costing them credibility before the conversation even begins. Mistake number 1, oversharing personal information. Now, I know this usually comes from a really good place. You're trying to build a connection. You want to seem open, personable, relatable. But in interviews, that can quietly backfire. The moment you start talking about hobbies, weekend plans, or personal details, that's when you shift the frame from professional to personal. And that shift does 3 things very subtly, but immediately. It gives the interviewer something irrelevant to judge. It opens the door to unconscious bias, and it raises quiet doubts about your focus and your boundaries. They won't tell you. They'll just move on. Now, this doesn't mean hiding who you are. It means staying in control of what they remember, because what they remember is what gets you hired. So what should you say instead? If they ask about hobbies, avoid the lifestyle angle. Instead, say this: I gravitate towards strategy and systems, anything that helps me reset with clarity. Now, if you feel like mentioning your family, pause and pivot to purpose. You can say, I'm looking for a long-term role where I can build, grow, and make meaningful impact. And if they ask, tell me about yourself, lead with value, not your biography. I break that down in a prior video. Here's the real takeaway. There's no such thing as neutral in an interview. Every word either moves you closer to an offer or it makes it easier for them to say no. Interviews don't reward full transparency. They reward relevance. So say less, say it with clarity. Say what gets remembered. Mistake number 2, being too honest about why you're leaving. Maybe your manager wasn't supportive, and maybe you were underpaid. Maybe the role made you question your value. I know I've had issues with managers. And if that's your reality, you're not wrong to feel it. But here's the issue. When that's the story you lead with, it doesn't sound like growth. It sounds like recovery. And in an interview, that changes how you're perceived, often without a word being said. It raises quiet assumptions like, are they going to bring drama? Will they be difficult to manage? Is this a risk? Even if the interviewer agrees with you, it doesn't serve your outcome, because interviews aren't really about where you've been. They're about where you're going and whether that company can see themselves going there with you. So here's the shift. Don't talk about what you're leaving. Talk about what you're moving toward. So try saying this: I'm ready to apply my experience in insert specific skill to drive measurable impact. Or you could say, I'm looking for a team with strong collaboration and leadership I can grow under. Or you could say, I'm excited to take on more complex challenges and scale my impact. It's still the truth, just framed for your future. This isn't about being fake. It's about keeping the focus on your next chapter. Because one unfiltered answer, no matter how valid, can quietly close doors, especially if you think the question is harmless. Now, if this made you rethink how you'd answer that question, send this to a friend who's interviewing too. Most people don't catch mistakes like this until it's too late. And if you want to come back to this later, save this to your playlist. You're going to want these examples when it's time to prep. But let's keep going. This next one trips people up even more. Mistake number 3, mishandling the where do you see yourself in 5 years question. Now, this one seems harmless, but how you answer it can quietly shape the entire impression you leave behind. If you've ever said, I'm not really sure, or eventually I'd like to pivot into something else, or I thought about starting my own thing, you were being honest, but without context, those answers can raise quiet concerns. Because this question isn't just small talk, it's a long-term investment test. What they're really asking is, are you someone that we should develop, or are you already halfway out the door? And vague answers, even well-intentioned ones, can sound like this: I'm not staying, which easily turns into, you're not worth investing in. You don't need a perfect 5-year plan. You just need to show that you're present and aligned with what this role offers. So here's a version that can work for you. I want to deepen my expertise in the space, take on more responsibility, and grow into leadership, ideally right here. Now that one line communicates focus, ambition, and staying power without boxing you in. If that still feels like a stretch, you are not alone. That's why I help clients build custom responses that reflect where they could grow without making promises that they'll regret. Because here's the truth: handled well, this question will help you build trust. Handled casually, it creates doubts that you'll never hear about, but that shape the outcome. Mistake number 4, letting desperation show. You may think you're coming across as committed, willing, and flexible, but desperation doesn't read as dedication, it reads as risk. If you've ever said, I really need this job, I'll take anything, I can start immediately, it's understandable, especially if you're under pressure. But that energy shifts the dynamic in the room. And here's what happens, often without a word. You're seen as a fallback. It's assumed that you have no other options. And suddenly, their offer drops lower, slower, and less seriously. It costs you leverage before you've even started negotiating. Here's a stronger way to frame it. You can say, I'm excited about the opportunity and confident I can add value. I'd be ready to start within X amount of weeks to ensure a smooth transition. That one sentence shows interest without sounding desperate, signals professionalism and not panic, and keeps you in control of your timeline. Because here's the truth: the less you appear to need the job, the more valuable you will seem. This is one of the most common blind spots that I see. Corporate hiring doesn't reward perfection, it rewards positioning. You don't need to overhaul who you are. You need to frame what you bring clearly, calmly, and through the lens of value. Mistake number 5, revealing your age without meaning to. You're not saying your age out loud, but you might be giving them the math. Maybe you mention you've been in the field for 30 years, or reference your graduation date, or say something like, this will probably be my last role. And while you may mean it as a sign of experience or commitment, it could shift the perspective quietly and quickly. The assumptions are going to sound like, you're too senior, too expensive, or you won't stay very long, or might be out of touch. It's not fair, but it happens. Because once those impressions form, they're hard to reverse. You won't get a note about it, you'll just stop hearing back. And here's the shift. Anchor your answers in value, not in years. So try say something like this: I've led teams that delivered X result, and I bring deep experience in Y skill that directly aligns with what this role needs. That reframes your background in terms of relevance, not age. It focuses on what you solve right now. You're not erasing your experience, you're shaping how it's understood. And when it comes to interviews, perception often speaks louder than truth. I'm curious, have you ever said something in an interview that felt fine but never heard back? Drop it in the comments. Let's build a list of subtle mistakes that no one warns you about. And if you've ever heard the advice of just be yourself, share this video. There's a smarter way to show up. Mistakes number 6 and 7, talking about politics or personal health. Now, these topics usually come up casually. Sometimes it's part of a story, sometimes to build connection. But in interviews, even small comments about politics or personal health can shift how you're perceived without warning. You might be trying to sound open or explain a gap in your resume or just be honest, but here's what tends to happen. You invite unconscious bias. You shift attention away from your value and you create a conversation that you can't control. Even if it feels harmless in the moment, you don't know how it's landing. You don't get to reframe it. You won't give feedback, you'll just stop hearing back. So here's a good rule of thumb. If it doesn't directly relate to your ability to do the job, leave it out. Not everything belongs in the room, especially if it doesn't serve your outcome. You're not there to be fully known. You're there to be clearly understood for the strengths that you bring to the table. Because these conversations aren't just about who you are, they're about what you can help them achieve. Mistake number 8, sharing your salary history. It can feel like an honest thing to do. Maybe the interviewer asks directly. Maybe it seems like standard protocol. So you share your past salary, just trying to be transparent. But here's the problem. That number becomes an anchor, not in your favor. If you were underpaid, they'll use that to justify a lower offer. If you were well paid, they may use it to cap your growth. Either way, you've shifted the conversation away from your worth and toward what someone else has decided to pay you. Here's a better move. Instead, say something like this. I'm targeting a competitive market range of this range between X dollars to Y dollars, based on my experience and current industry standards. That one sentence centers the conversation on value, not your history. It keeps your leverage intact and signals quiet confidence. So listen, you don't have to justify, you don't need to apologize, and you certainly don't need to drag old numbers into new opportunities, because your last paycheck isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of what someone else got away with paying you. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this. Interviews aren't just about what you say, they're shaped by how you frame it. Small shifts in language can change how you are seen, not just as a candidate, but as a leader, a partner, and a long-term investment. This isn't about playing a role. It's about showing up with clarity, confidence, and quiet strategy. But here's the other half of the equation. None of this matters if you're not getting in the room in the first place. If your LinkedIn isn't showing up in searches, if it doesn't clearly reflect your value, if it's not making the right first impression, then you're missing opportunities even before they start. I've got another video that walks you through how to fix that, step by step. From how your profile reads to how you show up in recruiter searches. It's all connected, so let's keep going.